Welcome to another edition of Living with Purpose. Today, I have a very special person, somebody that I really enjoy being with. It's Natalie Vega O'Neill. She is the CEO and President of Junior Achievement for Washington State and now Idaho. And she is also serves on the board of several organizations, including Kaboom, which builds these playgrounds for kids around the country. So please join me in welcoming Natalie. Natalie, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and have this conversation with you.
So you have this interesting background, right? You went into this sector, but talk about your journey as a Latino, as somebody that is brought up in the minority community. And for our listeners, Junior Achievement is an organization that is global, that works with young people and teaches them entrepreneurship skills. And I'm going to let Natalie talk more about it. But just so that you know, in terms of what she does. So talk a little bit about your upbringing, where you grew up and what was that like?
I had a wonderful family-oriented upbringing, which I know is a gift and a blessing and not something that everyone has. And it absolutely set my foundation as a human being for what I ended up doing in my life and what I am doing in my life and what my purpose is. I think that I was very fortunate to grow up in a family and in a community and an environment where opportunity was present. I was consistently taught and encouraged that my voice mattered and that I belonged in all of the rooms that I stepped into from a very early age. So I never realized that was, that the opposite could be the case, that there were rooms where my sisters and myself didn't matter or didn't belong. And as you had mentioned, I grew up in a Mexican American family and raised in a culture that was deeply female driven, and women were not only central to what we did, but they were revered and respected and really powerful in shaping our family and in shaping our family culture and community. And I think that foundation has stayed with me my whole life. It gave me confidence very early on, but it also gave me a very strong sense of responsibility, responsibility to use my voice, I think, responsibility to lead and to lead in the right ways, and helping create spaces, no matter where I was, to make sure that others that were there alongside with me felt the same sense of belonging and possibility that I did. And that's really what drove me to get into the social sector, the nonprofit sector. I was always drawn to purpose-driven organizations, mission-driven organizations, particularly around organizations that connected education and equity and basic needs being met for families. I would say my path is nowhere perfectly linear at all, but it's always been anchored in what I would call impact, and thinking about how do we have the best possible impact for the communities that we're representing. If it's access, how do we open more doors? How do we ensure young people can see, possibilities and futures for themselves that maybe they haven't yet imagined? And so that's what's led me to my work at Junior Achievement today as the CEO of Junior Achievement. I really do find the honor and privilege of leading an organization that really does exactly that. We look at economic mobility and try to expand possibilities and opportunities for students, and looking at connecting students to real world opportunities and finding out what their purpose and passions are.
So before we come to Junior Achievement, I want to go back to your childhood.
Yes.
So just a little bit more color, because I think this is so important, where people can understand how an upbringing shapes people. So talk a little bit about your parents.
Yes.
And where did you grow up, right? I mean, just to get a flavor, because on my podcast, people have had this incredible journey. Some have been adopted, some have come from wealthy families, some have come with broken families, and it's just very interesting. So just give a little deeper layer as to your family.
My family, I am the middle of three girls. So anyone that's familiar with the Brady Bunch, I'm the Jan Brady of my family makeup, my family dynamic. And it was, my sisters, myself, my mom, and my dad. and my father was a metallurgist. He worked in the steel industry. So we grew up
Mm.
in Northwest Indiana. He's actually from the Pacific Northwest
Ah,
and got an engineering degree. He grew up in Tacoma, and went to WSU and then moved to the Midwest for the steel industry because he went into chemical metallurgy and used his engineering degree in that way. And that was where the big, steel industry boom was happening in the Rust Belt areas of the United States at that time in the, early 70s. The steel industry was the place to work in Northwest Indiana. And so my mom
yeah,
was an administrator there. She worked in administration, and my dad was in management, and they met via the work day and work parties and things like that, and ended up getting married and had my sisters and I. And my older sister and I are only 15 months apart. So we grew up very close, very closely aligned in, kind of how we were parented and how we were raised, and really our affection and appreciation for one another. Kind of all of my memories in life include her from the very earliest
yeah,
age, which is, I think, a special and unique thing. And also, again, anchors me in that sense of family and togetherness and belonging. And then our younger sister came, and we always say she was just like our prize and our, real life doll growing up, that all girls want a doll growing up. So we got
yeah,
our younger sister, who's about 4.5 years younger than me. And it was, I remember, playing basketball with my dad when one summer out in Northwest Indiana, I had asked him, I said, Dad, did you ever want a son? Did you ever, because
yeah,
everybody had, boys or a different mix. We were unique at that time of having three girls, and the phrase girl dad hadn't come into existence yet.
right.
And he said, no, your mother and I always wanted healthy children. That's all that we wanted, was healthy births, healthy children. And that's what we got. So I wouldn't ask for anything else. And I think, going back to kind of my opening statements, that also instilled in me a purpose and a reason and pride
Right.
in my existence, because my parents had pride in our existence. And so my mother's side of the family is Mexican American, and they were all in Northwest Indiana. So we had a really large, loud, female dominated Mexican
Yeah.
American family. It was just a joy. There was constant joy when my family got together, and we celebrated everything. Every graduation or confirmation or birthday or anniversary, it were these huge, large parties. My mother was one of nine, and her father was the oldest of 12. And so thinking about,
Yeah.
first cousins and second cousins and aunts and
Really.
uncles, there was no such thing as a small gathering growing up in my family. And that is just what I became accustomed to, is being around a lot of people most of the time, and it was always in celebration of something. So having joy anchored in our togetherness and coming together. And that really is how I feel about, socializing and getting together now and being with people now. It should be a joyful experience and fun, and lots of laughter and lots of loudness. And my sisters and I all married into, or have husbands who came from much smaller families and
Mm.
not as loud or boisterous. So that's been, an acclamation for them. But my anchor has always just been with my family, which is just a beautiful thing. It's been a beautiful thing.
Is your family still in Indiana or?
Yeah, everyone has relocated to the Pacific Northwest,
Mm.
and everyone is down in Portland, which is why my husband and our children, we had lived in Portland for 10 years
Yeah.
before I came to Seattle, before I got the job at Junior
Yeah.
Achievement, which brought us here. But everyone's down in Portland now, which is nice. We really have been drawn to the Pacific Northwest. I think it must have been in our genetics, with my dad having been from
Right.
Tacoma, that
Wow.
we were drawn to this area, and we love it here. We love being here. We love living here. We love the quality of life that we have here, and being, close enough. Of course, I would like to be down the block from my sisters. We would like to live in a cul-de-sac all together, but being close enough that we could drive to see one another.
Yeah. So growing up there, then what happened next? So where did you get educated? Where did you go to school,
Yeah.
college, and then how do you move to Portland?
So went to school in Indiana. I went to a university called Ball State University in Muncie,
Yeah.
Indiana. I had just shared this story the other day that growing up in Northwest Indiana, we were about 45 miles outside of Chicago. So we got all Chicago radio stations, Chicago television stations. We were
Right.
Chicago sports fans. Like we grew up within the Chicago market. And so when I went to Southern Indiana for college, I called my dad after I had been there for like a week and I said, Dad, all of these people have Southern accents. Where are they from? This is this whole new world to me. This other, and he said, no, that's pretty much every part of Indiana outside of the Chicago metro area. It's just a different. So I had a completely different upbringing because of the geographic location where I grew
Right.
up with being next to a major city. But I loved my time at Ball State. It was the right size school for me to go to. I didn't want to go to a Big Ten university like IU or Purdue. I really wanted to
Right.
be in a smaller space. And the reason that I went to Ball State was because I was drawn to communications, particularly telecommunications and news broadcasting. So I wanted to be the next Diane Sawyer and
Right.
deliver the nightly news. And, that was really what my passion was at the time and what I wanted to do. And I loved every minute of undergrad. We got to produce stories and do newscasts and do kind of man on the street things. And I had wonderful internships and wonderful professors. And I always say that my key, kind of the secret sauce that I had in undergrad, even though I ultimately didn't end up going into that industry, was I took so many speech and communication classes that
Right.
I have a lot of a very strong level of comfortableness with public speaking, which has come in very handy in my leadership roles in nonprofit and communication, which I think everybody needs the education and training in communication and being, impactful communicators. And so after I left undergrad, I moved up to Chicago and I lived there for many years. Had spent 1 year in kind of TV ad sales and very quickly realized that I did not want to do that. It did not interest me. It was a really fun place to work in my 20s, because it was a fun environment to work in. But back in those days, you'll remember, we advertised jobs in newspapers. So I was looking
Right.
through the Chicago Tribune and I saw an advertisement, a development associate at the Make-A-Wish Foundation of Chicago, of Illinois. And that is how I got into the nonprofit space. And so I really have done almost every job that there is to do because that job was data entry. So we would get donations mailed into the office. I would open up the envelopes, look at the checks, and I would enter the data of
Right.
the donors for the organization. But what happened for me there was really that alignment of what I wanted to do with my
Right.
professional career. And it was the mission driven focus of the work, the root in helping marginalized populations that I was so drawn to. And during that time, a colleague of mine had said, Hey, I'm going to this graduate school called the Erickson Institute to get my master's in social work. You should come check it out. Just sit in on a
Mm.
class one night and see. I hadn't even thought about going to grad school. It wasn't on my radar at all. I didn't want to be a social worker, but I thought, okay, well, I'll go and see. That moment when I sat in that particular class, it was a family support class of working with families in the early childhood space. I said, this is where I belong. In this moment, in this time, this is where I belong, and I have to go to school here. And it's because I learned about advocacy. I learned what the word advocacy meant and advocating for populations and groups of people in the context of it being early childhood education and child development. And so that's what I ended up ultimately getting my master's degree in, knowing that I didn't want to teach, but that I wanted to go into the child development space and youth sector space when it came to advocacy. And so from the Make-A-Wish Foundation, I worked for the YWCA as a family support
Right.
specialist, helping families in a suburb of Chicago, a high need neighborhood of Chicago, find wraparound resources at a Head Start program. And then after that, when I finished my graduate school, I said, I'm going to the beach. I'm in my 20s and I'm going to go live by the beach. So I moved to San Diego, California, and was very fortunate in that the Make-A-Wish Foundation in San Diego had a maternity leave open. And so I
Mm.
went and did that because of my experience with Make-A-Wish in Chicago. And from there, I got recruited to do something that I was woefully unqualified for at the time, but the person that hired me saw something in me that gave them some confidence, and I co-founded a charter school in downtown Los Angeles. It was a port of entry neighborhood where parents made the decision of how they wanted to invest in their kind of 8-block radius of their neighborhood called Pico Union in downtown Los Angeles. And it was a parent-led, community-led charter school that was forming, and I led the construction and design and build of the early childhood facility and the on-site medical clinic and the parent education programs that we had there. And that's how I ended up on the West Coast, was kind of through that transition after graduate school, and how I ended up in Southern California. And because of the timing of living in Southern California and the funding opportunities that came to us, our particular school got a lot of publicity with the local LA County Board of Directors and the State Board of Education, because we were using some statewide tobacco tax money that was coming, that I started doing a lot of advocacy and testifying in front of the LA City Council and going up to Sacramento. And that's really where I learned about advocacy and using my voice and helping support the communities that I was representing and working with and working for. And through those relationships that I was building there, I met a woman who had gotten recruited by the Gates Foundation to start up the Gates Foundation initial investment in early childhood education, which was called Thrive by 5 Washington. And she was leading the preschool program in Los Angeles, and she and I had done some advocacy work together because of the school that I was working at. And she said, "Do you ever thought about living in Seattle? Have you ever thought about moving up to Seattle?" And I said, "Well, actually, my dad's from Seattle. My grandmother was still alive at the time. My dad's siblings were here, and I had cousins here. And I thought, I can go up to Seattle." And during the time that I had been in Southern California, my parents and one of my sisters had moved to Portland. And so it was really, I said, oh, I can be closer to my immediate family by coming up. So that's how I ended up in Seattle the first time. And I was here for 2.5 years and worked with that initiative and did that work together. And then was recruited by one of our grantees to go and lead the early childhood work for an international nonprofit called Save the Children. Yes. And so I was there for the good part of a decade and absolutely loved that organization and the work that I was able to do there. And kind of that's where my leadership changed, from kind of moving out of the early childhood education space into overseeing all of the domestic programs that we were doing at Save the Children, which included emergency disaster and response work and psychosocial work, including education work and physical activity and nutrition work. And so I was there for about 9 years. And during that time, I got married and I had children. And so my priorities changed. And, I was traveling about 60% of the time in that role. My husband and I had relocated from Seattle to Portland because I was primarily working remotely. And so we were able to be around my family, my parents, my sisters, their kids. But because I was traveling so much and I had said my priorities changed, I said, I really need to I'm ready to kind of have this transition at this point in my life to do something that's more local, to really be able to invest in my local community. And so I was looking for opportunities that would allow me to be in a CEO role, to be part of a mission-driven organization, but to be more local and stay closer to home. And that's how I came to Junior Achievement. That's how I ended up here.
What a wonderful story. And again, to our listeners, it's actually quite interesting to understand how opportunities come and the power of actually willing to try. If you had not gone out and just gone to attend that class, it would have been a whole different life. So this notion of saying yes when somebody just gives you the opportunity is just a wonderful way to kind of think about how it eventually unfolds your life in different ways. So let's talk about Junior Achievement for a little bit before we turn to purpose. So talk a little bit about your biggest achievements here.
Junior Achievement has been around in Washington State for almost 75 years. We're going to be celebrating our 75th anniversary in 2028. And we focus on economic mobility. So how do we make this generation more prosperous, more successful, happier, more satisfied in their careers than the generations prior to them. And we work with students all across the state of Washington and into the Panhandle Panhandle of Idaho. We are one of 98 JA areas around the country. So you had mentioned before, we're not only national, but we're also global. So there's junior achievement worldwide, and junior achievement is in many countries around the globe. But here in the United States, we're one of 98 areas that focus on kindergarten through age 25 education and support for students, all anchored in three pillars of financial literacy, work and career readiness, and entrepreneurial mindset, really leading up to supporting economic mobility for students and for communities. So we teach students how money works, trying to have them happy, positive relationship with money, demystifying money. We, want them to question what problems in the world that they want to solve. What are they curious about? What are they interested in? What are they passionate about? And how those interests and passions can lead to careers, and what education and training they need, and how education and training can lead to career success. And then thinking about how to start and run a business if that's of interest to them, and what entrepreneurship means, and what are entrepreneurial mindset skills that they need to be successful in the business industry, and then how businesses are positively contributing to thriving communities here in Washington, and what thriving communities look like. So we really want to instill joy. We've talked a lot about the joy that comes from the work that we do, and the purpose that comes from the work that we do, and helping guide and lead students to finding their purpose in the world, and their place in the world, and their role. A joyful work that we do, being able to interact and engage with students and volunteers and educators, and being able to go into classrooms to deliver our programs, to be able to host students at our facility, to have experiential learning opportunities through hands-on program opportunities that we're providing to students, and to go directly into communities to deliver our programs, to breaking down barriers of geography or socioeconomics, and be able to deliver our programs right to communities directly.
For our listeners, if you ever want to go visit it, they have a facility down in Auburn. You can go there. It is just a fantastic place. It's a place, it's like, the way I can describe it is, you enter into a toy store and you get all of these businesses lined up, and you get to role play. There's a Delta Airlines, and there is the bank, and there is Starbucks, and there is all sorts of things, and you can learn how to be in these different places, and it's supported by all of these organizations. So it's just a fun place to be. So if you have kids and you want them to go experience it, go check it out. So I had a great time when I was there. I was like a
Yes.
kid in a candy store, and I was just hanging around with all these young kids who were basically trying to serve me on different things that they were doing, whether it was coffee or opening a bank account. And so it was just a lot of fun. And I love the word joy. So talk a little bit about the importance of purpose and joy,
Yeah.
and why that is important to you.
I feel like I've touched on it a little bit, in the sense that I really believe that purpose has been my anchor throughout my career. And I would not have been able to do a career that wasn't aligned with me professionally, and my personal and professional beliefs really needed to align. That was very important to me. And I think that it's what has kept me steady, when things get hard, is that there is a purpose to what I'm doing. It's often called the mission driven, but even beyond the mission, and we've talked about this before, beyond the mission, there is a purpose, right? The mission is the impact that we want to have, but what is our purpose, as an organization? And so for me, the decision to go into purpose-driven work has been so meaningful. And I think that the work is not easy. There are moments when the challenges for whatever nonprofit I'm working for, they feel so big, and it could be, navigating times of uncertainty, or having to make hard decisions, or pushing through resistance if we're not getting the results that we want. But always in those moments, I come back to the why I do this work. Think about the people that we're serving, the populations that we're serving at Junior Achievement. I think about the students that we're serving, and the educators that we partner with, the long-term impact that we want to have, and really coming back to the purpose of me being part of this organization, the purpose of this organization. And I think that purpose creates accountability, because when the work is tied to something bigger than myself, than yourself, I think that you show up differently. I'm more willing to take risks and to try to really listen deeply and to keep going, even if the path isn't clear, because the purpose is what's holding me accountable to getting the results that we need, to having the impact, to seeing the change that we want to have, to seeing the joy that we want to have with the students. And so it really, purpose hasn't just been, a motivator for me or an anchor for me. It's also, I think, just my compass. It's what has guided me in how I lead and how I choose where I want to work, and the decisions that I've made, and how I have gotten through moments of adversity, I think has really been part of the true purpose of why I'm here and what I'm doing.
This notion of purpose and accountability, I think that's just a very wonderful way to frame why one should have purpose, because it not only leads to authenticity, but it also leads to accountability. And I think that's just a wonderful way to think about your purpose and one's purpose. So as we conclude, give us your one golden nugget, a piece of wisdom that you would like to share with everyone.
Well, I loved before when you had said, you have to be willing to say yes. And that's, I think, part of what I was going to share today is don't wait for permission to step into your potential. Because I think that so many people, especially women, especially people of color, are taught either directly or indirectly to wait until they're fully ready or fully qualified or fully certain of themselves. But I don't think that that's the space where growth happens. I think that growth happens when you step forward before you feel ready. I know that in my personal career in life, in those moments where I said, I'm not so sure about this, is when I've had the most growth, when I haven't felt 100% ready or 100% confidence. And the confidence, I think, comes after the action, not before it. That's what's been the most meaningful for me, is that I feel more confident after I've gotten through whatever the situation is, whatever the action is, and of course not before it. So the confidence comes after, not before it. And I think also for me, there's many nuggets, but I think that mentorship has been so instrumental in my path and my career, building that community. I talked so much about how my family has been my anchor in my life, and I have carried that through the course of my life to always have community. That's been so huge and so important to me. And then also just to stay open to learning. I think that we always have to be curious and interested. You modeled that the best for all of us, I think, in that being curious and interested in learning more. But don't hold yourself back, waiting for someone else to validate your readiness.
I love that, right? That don't wait for permission for
Step
your
into your potential. Yeah.
I think that's just fantastic. It has just been such a delight speaking with you, Natalie, and thank you very much for being on the podcast. Again, purpose is the renewable source of energy that continues to drive humanity forward. Thank you for tuning in. Until the next episode. Natalie, thanks.
Thank you, Ankur, so much.